Well, I want to share with you, it is a great honor to have Sabra Starnes with us today. I learned about Sabra from doing a radio interview with the founders of Clinicians of Color, and Sabra's a member. When I noted what we did to the founders of Clinicians of Color was adoption, they couldn't say her name enough times. And I got a chance to meet Sabra, and she did some training for the coalition, and she did a radio program with us as well. Sabra Starnes and her twin were adopted as infants in a closed adoption by a white family. Growing up in a transracial family in the Midwest had many joys and, of course, challenges as well. Sabra and her family experienced racism and discrimination. Sabra learned to persevere and be a strong advocate for herself. She provided adoption counseling using an attachment-based therapy connected with expressive therapies, and I'm sure we're going to be learning about that today. She's passionate about her clinical work and speaking and training on adoption both locally and nationally. As an expert adoption therapist for the past 22 years, she has the personal experience and professional training to work with adoptees and adoptive families. She's a strong advocate for children who are in care to have permanency or be reunified with their original families. She's passionate about making sure that adoptee voice is not only heard but amplified. And she has a load of credentials that you could read in the bio, but she's got wonderful trainings and degrees. But the last thing I want to share is Sabra and her husband are the adoptive parents of two African-American sons. And for more, after here, you want to learn about Sabra, just remember her name, Sabra Starnes, and it's www.sabrastarnes.com. I'm going to turn it over to you, Sabra.
Great, thank you. Well, it is wonderful to be here. I'm really excited about this conference. This is wonderful that we're able to still keep things going, and we're doing this online. So today I'm going to be with you really briefly. So I'm excited to get it to talk about something that's important. I think when we think about doing therapy, and so today my topic is attachment-based family therapy. Is it really worth it? And we know with families having just busy lives, and my PowerPoint, just a moment, to think of doing therapy oftentimes is kind of last on the list, but really needs to be a kind of definitely a priority along with all the other different things and activities that a family is doing. So look, just to share a little bit that Pat had shared with you. Some of the treatment modalities that I am trained in and using with attachment-based therapies with family is TheraPlay, didactic psychotherapy, which is created by Dr. Daniel Hughes, and trusted behavioral relational intervention, which was created by Karen Previs, which is a reflective coaching program. So my work for the last 22 years has been based in the theory of using attachment theory with adoptive and foster families. And my passion has been both personal and professional in doing this work as an adoptive mother, as an adoptee. I know how important it is to making sure that we're amplifying the adoptee voice, and that the work that we're doing with families and doing clinical work really needs to focus in on the whole family and really helping a family in focusing on their needs and what they're needing to work on. So just a little bit in talking as we get started, giving you a little definition of attachment theory. Attachment theory was created by Dr. John Bowlby in the 1950s, and we have really evolved from that time of looking at what attachment means, what it is. When you think of attachment, it's a deep and enduring emotional bond that connects one person to another across time and space. I love that definition, and when I use that definition with families, we use it in maybe we do a sand tray, or we might do an art piece to really talk about what that attachment is, not just between it's between families, it's between and within families, between a sibling and between a parent. And that this attachment dance that I call between another person and a parent and child is something that's ongoing. And that research has shown that our attachment styles are not permanent, that our attachment, the way we attach and connect, can change and develop and evolve over time, which I think is a really hopeful and helpful for families to hear. That a child who may be having attachment challenges at 2 doesn't mean that this is going to be their their parameter of how they're going to respond and function throughout their life, that it's something that they can grow and develop, but there are oftentimes family needs some very specific ways of helping in through professional help in therapy to really help around developing the family's attachment dance that they're having within the family for it to be healthier, more playful, more engaging, better communication, and just overall for families to be doing better. Not perfect, but as we know, for families to just be doing better than where they may be. This quote is by Dr. Karen Previs that talked about it is only as we heal our own histories that we can know the path to lead our children to heal their own histories. So this is something that in thinking of doing attachment-based therapies with families, so important that the caregivers and the adults are really aware of their own attachment experiences, their own history of being parented and the good, the bad, the difficult, so that when they are in the room with their child, with a teen, with an infant that they have either are through adoption or foster care, they realize it's not just about the child's history, the child's trauma, the child's issues of, but it's really also theirs that's going to play a critical part in the healing. And I want to just pause there. I know we're going to be together briefly, but I'd love to see if anyone has a comment or a question just around around attachment theory and around this quote that I just shared. And if you do, you can put it in the chat or you can unmute yourself. So when we think about creating a healthy parent-child relationship with adoptive and foster families, there's some areas that we want to be aware of and thinking about having families come into doing therapy, staying in therapy, and really feeling that it's worth their time to come in to work with families. It's something that it's going to help. And so that we look at areas of strengthening the parent-child relationship and foster a sense of trust, security, and closeness for both parent and child. Improve the family interactions and expressions of affection, not just in session, but outside of session. So families can have other ways of connecting verbally and non-verbally to create a healthier connection and a healthier response to each other. And then increasing the level of playfulness and enjoyment between parent and child. When a family is responding and or is dealing with a real difficult attachment challenges, a child who maybe has difficulty with touch, with it receiving a healthy hug around touch, children who teens who are running away or are just really having difficulty accepting the family that they are in, often can create for a decrease in playfulness and humor. And so families who may feel like the only time that something we're enjoying, having enjoyment or no or experiencing playfulness is in a therapy session. And for families who will often have shared with me, therapy becomes a place that feels safe because the clinician is there holding a space that is not joining with just a child or not joining with the parents. It's really, as a clinician, you're holding a safe, neutral space for the family, that when things get difficult, you're not just saying, well, time's up, session's over. Instead, doing this work really requires a therapist to say, we're going to make sure everyone leaves the session safe in a safe, calm way. Many a times my sessions have gone from the therapy room to the outside of the therapy room, to when the child has left the building and we're out in the parking lot, and we then find a space that we can continue to do the work, so that as clinicians, you're really stepping outside of doing more of the traditional therapy, of really doing whatever it's going to need to take to really support the family system in where they're at. And then helping to improve coping and problem solving. This is from Gary Landers and Bratton, who look at using play-based interventions to work with families. And the work of the interventions I work with families are incorporating, let me go back a slide. Oh, my slides kind of moved on me, just a moment. helping to make sure that families we're using play-based interventions that are focusing on the attachment. When we're also around, so how this helps a family is it helps a family to be able to engage in helping the child to feel accepted in the family. If it's a family that is child is in a foster home, and that they are there for as period of time that they're there in the family, but they feel connected, that they feel part of the family, that they don't feel like an outlier or outside of the family. Instead, the work of this therapy is really to help everyone feel connected, feel safe, and feel wanted, and feel understood. And this helps. The goal of using attachment-based therapies is to assist children in learning to communicate and get along with others in the family, other outside the family. Also helps family members to consider and think about how wide of their circle are they engaging the child interacting. Sometimes that needs to start slowly, not introducing the child to everybody in the family. Instead, really moving in slowly, moving at the child's pace, allowing the child to be ready and accepting and wanting to meet other family members. Being able to encourage feelings of empathy and mutual respect among children and adults. So there's helping to create a attachment dance of understanding, of respect, and that parents can feel, helping also parents to really move away from feelings of shame, guilt, worry that they're doing it wrong, instead of helping families within this approach of using an attachment approach, is helping parents to, when they know better, they can do better in response to their child's needs and emotions. And then it provides a supportive environment which children can learn and practice appropriate and acceptable behaviors as individuals in a group and within a family. And when I think of behaviors, I really want families to consider and look at what's behind the behavior. What is often all behavior of children, anyone, as humans, our behavior really is sending a message to others, to either a way of letting someone know what we need, what our wants and needs are. And that our behaviors can be some way of a map that oftentimes can be confusing, oftentimes maybe not make sense to a parent, maybe asking a parent asking a child, it's time for bed, and it's every kind of a routine of it's bedtime, and the child says, I hate you, get away from me, you're the worst, I don't want you to be my parent, I hate you, you're not my real mom. And the parents, like, inside feeling just like, oh, what happened, I just said it's bedtime. Where the child's responding, something may have internally is happening for that child in that moment. They're having thoughts of loss of the family of origin. There may be remembering the tone that the parent is using, reminds them of something that they've experienced past that triggers them, and has a trauma response, that they're responding in a way of survival. In that survivor mode, which is in a fight, flight, or freeze, of feeling like I don't feel safe. So helping a parent to respond in a different approach can be really helpful to how things can change within the family and happen, without there needing to be things get explosive, things going unresolved. And so with the clinical professional help the families can get, this can really be very helpful. As a transracial adoptee growing up, my parents had as a transracial adopted family, we really had a hard time finding the right therapist. The first therapist that my parents found was a psychologist, and said that he was versed in working with children and was aware of adoption issues. But what happened very quickly, without really getting to know my family or know me, diagnosed me with ADHD, and told my parents that I needed to be on Ritalin, and that was going to help with my emotional and behavior issues. And my parents really were at a place where they did not know what to do, and they were listening to the professionals. They're professors themselves. My both parents have doctorates, but as parents, they really were wanting to make sure that they could provide the best for my sister and I, and were really worried and struggling. And so with that advice, I was on Ritalin for about a month, and my parents were like, oh no, this is not it. We need something different. And so they continued to look and find the right treatment. But what they found was a lot of therapists just did not understand that from a attachment lens and from adoption lens. A lot of the therapies that my parent were getting recommendation was for me to be in individual therapy. So to do attachment therapy and for me to do work on my attachment, I could not do that alone. I needed my family in the room with me. We needed to work on that together. And so when families are needing some support and maybe they've had experiences with their child getting individual therapy and they've not seen any changes, and or parents are feeling very overwhelmed and disappointed when they're asked to sit in the waiting room and not be in the session to talk about what's going on in the day-to-day of a family, it can often feel like, is going to therapy worth it? Is my therapist going to understand us and get how to really help us go deeper into fixing and working through things that we're really struggling with? So this is also important, I think, too. If I was going to ask for a show of hands on this quote here, it says that attachment does not have to be reciprocal. And so I often ask if you would agree or disagree. And you can put this in the comments if you agree or disagree with it, that the attachment between a parent and a child, between a partner and another person, that being reciprocal, meaning that that relationship is going to be 50-50. That it's going to be a dance, that each person is going to bring the same energy, the same connection, the same interaction to each other. What with that, we're in this case is that it doesn't. That and this is a parent and this is a child. The parent who is trying to connect. I love you. Can you come and sit next to me so I want to read you a story? And the child's like, no, I don't want to be. I want to go and play on the computer. I don't want you to get away from me. And the child is moved away physically and is verbally disconnecting from the parent who's trying to connect. And the parent has that feeling of, this child doesn't love me. I'm trying to be loving. I'm trying to connect, and this child's avoiding me. Parents have felt like the child is doesn't want to be loved by me. And so instead, having the parent understand that relationship is not going to always be 50-50. It doesn't mean that the child doesn't love the parent or doesn't want to be connected. What it means is the parent needs to respond in a different way, giving some space, giving a moment of backing up, but not continuing to try to go back to the child and say, why, what's wrong? Instead, using some different approaches. And then often in therapy, those things can be worked on within the session. And in this slide, you'll see the parent saying, am I good enough? I'm so tired. Should I be doing more? I'm failing. I look a mess. And the child saying, I love her. And this could be for a parent caregiver who feels that is worried and wondering, well, really children and all of us, we're wired for connection. But our connection is not always needs to be the same, that we need to learn that children need it different ways. When I say children, that's an infant, that's a toddler, that's a teen, that's a preteen. They need a different way that's nonverbal. That oftentimes just talking may not be enough to get the connection, for some change to happen. And in looking at the responses, since a lot of you also agree and see that the relationship dance is not always is not always reciprocal, and it's okay. That it does not mean that the child or the parent doesn't love each other, doesn't want to build a healthier relationship and connection. It just may need that there's some difficulties, it may need some professional support. When we think about how attachment develops, we'll see that there's many ways that have been identified as playing a vital role in all of the following: maintain the bonds of trust, attaining full intellect potential, acquiring a conscience, developing relationships with others, identifying and having a high, healthy self-esteem, learning to regulate feelings, language development, development of brain structures, organization of the nervous system. So all of these areas are used and we look at, and these are not just a one-time thing at a certain age for a child. This is an ongoing, a lifelong thing that for our children and for families to be working on and thinking about. So felt safety. For those of you who've maybe heard this term, this is I love the word felt safety, and when I think about it, this picture of shows of connection, of touch, of engagement in a way that doesn't have to use words. And so felt safety is a term it's used quite frequently when we think about helping children with histories of trauma, neglect, and abuse, and around attachment. And so with felt safety, we're helping our clients to look at ways that they can connect as a family. And so you're helping parents and caregivers to learn to be more attuned to their child's needs. So a child who, example, parent and child in session, being playful, parent who maybe a child is kind of short, has their arms folded, their face looks upset, and they're not wanting to be in session or wanting to talk. And so the parent's kind of thinking, well, maybe if I get, be playful and silly. And so the parent goes to the child and tickles them. This is a 6-year-old child, and it's tickling them, and the child's, kind of doing this, but the child's face also may be doing, but the child's body is tight and tense, and the parent is taking that in and think, oh, this is working. The child's being more playful, their face has changed. But we're having a parent be more attuned to the child's body language. Where I may say, notice the child's arm. Do you see the child's feeling tense? Their body maybe their face may look silly, but their body is showing you that they're not feeling this is good. It feels like a fun and playful touch. So helping parents to slow down, getting a child to share that tickle feels just right versus sometimes parents going in to the connection too quickly, too fast, because they're feeling like maybe if I just get the child to feel more engaged and playful, things will be okay. But oftentimes that can create things to spiral into a way that the parent didn't want, the caregiver was hoping didn't happen. So felt safety also helps with families to be able to called name it to tame it. And this is from TBRI, which is a reflective coaching program, which is trusted behavioral relational intervention, which was created by Karen Previs. And in that naming it to tame it, you're helping families to name what's happening, name the behavior, name it, to then help look at it from an emotional response. So you're helping around doing interventions, activities within sessions that focus on emotional and physical regulation for everyone in the family. And then you're helping to give it voice. Our tone, our inflection, the sound of the tone is really critical and really important. We're helping families to work through using not just using that inside voice, but finding different voices, different tones that can be a different response for the child, so that parents can practice that within session. I wouldn't just tell parents, I want you to work on your voice this week. Instead, we're doing interventions activities. One activity that you could do with a family is have them do an activity. This is a TheraPlay activity. I'm going to share with you TheraPlay, which is an attachment-based intervention approach of using in therapy with families. So it's called peanut butter and jelly. So the parent would say peanut butter in a dragon voice. Peanut butter, and then you'd have the child. So the child would say, can you do your voice in your dragon voice? peanut butter. So and then you would change it. And the therapist would say, could you say it like a tiny little mouse, mom? Peanut butter. And the child would say, peanut butter. And what's happening is that there's the energy and the interaction between the parent and child starts to change. You start to help a family see where they can slow down. Eye contact is being made. So as a therapist, you're helping to bring in some in the moment, in the here and now activities that can really be helpful for families outside of sessions, to help families to see that this 1 hour a week is something to use throughout every day, in small moments and big moments at home, so that parents really feel that yes, this hour that we're spending is an hour that's really helping us to refuel, re-energize, re-engage, so that during those moments outside of sessions, we've got some tools, we've got some ways of interacting. So the self-safety of helping families to really see that it's an ongoing way of being within a family that they can use at home, that uses nonverbal cues that can help promote attachment. So helping families using eye contact, where oftentimes for children and teens, are using our eyes is a great way for us to connect, for a way for a parent and a child to see each other, but often it can also be, it's a way of control. So we have control over, a parent can't say, look at me now, give me your eyes. They can say it, but they can't make it happen. A child has to want to engage in. And so children oftentimes will use this as a way of control by not looking, by looking away, by avoiding eye contact. So finding ways in using these interventions activities can be a way to help, and you're looking at it from the sense of attachment, meaning you're looking at it from that child, that infant and parent holding each other, parent holding the baby and giving the eye contact, checking to see, oh, I see you, the singing, the humming. So you're using this eye contact of what would be very similar to an infant and a caregiver with a teen, with a toddler, with a preschooler. You're using that way of connecting in, of saying, let me see your great brown eyes. Let me see those beautiful blue eyes. Let me see that wonderful green eyes. So you're helping a parent and child find other ways that are much more, at times may seem to be not matching the child's age. Because with this work, you're helping families to really recognize and tune into the child's emotional development versus their chronological age. And then looking at facial expression, looking at the noticing, taking in the parent and child, taking in their facial expression, looking to see the various different emotions: anger, worried, sad, distracted. So having families really work on emotional literacy outside of the mad, sad, happy, and scared. So helping families to look at is it mad or is it angry, can really helping families to scale the different levels of emotion. That we know that sad can have various different ranges of what maybe a child may be feeling. So helping parents to kind of check in with the child's temperature. I mentioned tone of voice, body language, it really is a way of reading about getting families to read each other's body language in a different way, that maybe right now it might be miscues, there might be misunderstandings. Helping a parent to be able to help the child respond to the body language in a different way. We're having one, for example, a parent and child maybe sitting next to each other. The child is tense. The parent, instead of moving away, the parent checking in and saying, "How does this feel when I connect with my hand next to you?" So this, in a session, you're helping families with using safe touch. And for some clinicians, that can feel a little bit of a worry and wonder, like, oh, I don't of being able to using attachment-based work, using touch. And we're talking about appropriate touch. We're also talking about having boundaries and understanding for children who have had sexual abuse, physical abuse, that you're not having families do things that are going to be invasive or intrusive, but you're helping families to connect in. Children who have had trauma, children who have had histories of the ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences, they often the thought is, well, they've been through so much. Let's just back up physically and emotionally. Instead, they need healthy touch. They need to relearn and re-engage and trust, and doing it at a pace that's at the child, helping the child be at their pace and not doing it in a way that's overwhelming. But you're needing part of the therapy is to bring that alive, bring that into the family. They're having struggles. And then pace, which is looking at the timing and the intensity, needs to be aware of their child's preferences for pacing. And that is by the interactions, the discussions, working, helping parents to sometimes we can say too much. Having parents to be able to step back and maybe wait and listen, giving wait time, giving opportunities for redos. And a redo is when a family does something, maybe a parent who says, you never listen, or you never want to hear me, when the never and the always. So helping parents try to say it in a different way. I know it's hard for you to sometimes use your ears to hear me. I know sometimes it's hard for your heart to hear that when I say that I truly love you and care about you. So there's a therapeutic relationship stance that occurs when you're using with an attachment sessions, that the therapist is outside of the relationship. It's the holder, so that you're not getting into building, splitting. The therapist isn't aligning with the parent or caregiver, or aligning with the child, so that all sessions are held with the whole family, so that families, everything that's talked about is talked about within the context of the family. If you're doing parent check-ins with just the adults, focusing on parenting things. So again, helping to move away from the secrecy, or just working with just the parents or just the child, doesn't get the family to really work through the issues that they're needing to. So this looks very different than more of the traditional therapy approaches. So there are several models of programs, and some of you may have are familiar with them. Maybe you have are trained in these approaches, or you've done these approaches and with your own family. I'm just going to share them for you to be aware of what they are, because I think that's important. So there's attachment, regulation, and competency, which is the ARC model. And then using this approach, again, focuses with families around really helping around attachment issues, physical and emotional regulation, and helping parents to really feel. And I think the word, when I think of competent, I often use more of helping families to feel that this is an ongoing process, versus being competent, not having parents have to be the experts, but to understand different ways that they can respond to their child. And then using psychoeducation around trauma, attachment, the trauma responses that children will have, doing parenting work with parents around their own attachment histories, their own attachment styles, and their work. Then there's didactic developmental psychotherapy, which was created by Dr. Daniel Hughes, which is an approach that helps families really focus more of a talk-based approach, but I incorporate play interventions in this work, but really focuses again on the relationship, and repairing, renewing, helping around relationships. And he uses an approach called PACE in his model, which is using playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy in the working with the family. And then there's TBRI, which is trust-based relational intervention, which is a reflective coaching approach to working with parents. And the other one that's not on here that I'm going to share with you is TheraPlay. And TheraPlay is an approach that you can use with families where you're engaging with play-based interventions and activities. We must help families to look behind the behavior. Too often, families are wanting to find the results or changes by just focusing on the behavior or looking at doing a behavior chart or having the child do individual therapy to focus on their behavior. And that is where this is oftentimes where families really feel like nothing's changing. This doesn't seem like the therapy isn't working. And so they stop. And I think therapy doesn't have to be forever. Therapy shouldn't take forever. I think change can happen really quickly when families are willing to invest, be committed, and take the time to in coming to therapy regularly. And with a therapist that has the understanding of adoption and foster care, has a really clear, not they didn't just read a book, but they have done the training and they've done the work of really understanding what it as far as the 7 issues around adoption issues and foster care. They really understand this from the foster and adoptee lens really clearly so that they're able to provide the support that's needed. Dr. Bowlby taught his quote, talking about the therapist's role is analogous to that of a mother who provides her child with a secure base from which to explore the world. So as a therapist, you as a holder, as a person in the room that's holding not just the space for the child but the space for the whole family, which can be challenging. And so the clinician really having good supervision, getting consultation, doing your own work, doing your own therapy, so that things may be triggered, things may come up in session that you really want to be able to be steady and hold in the work of working and doing this attachment work with families. It's really critical because if not, it's going to be you're not going to be really helping the family as well as you can when you've not been able to have a clear foundation of understanding what the family needs. So we're going to talk about TheraPlay. And if you could put in the chat box, if you are familiar with TheraPlay, maybe you've heard of it, maybe you've used it within your own family, or maybe you are trained in it. Just like to know who's in the room. So TheraPlay is an engaging relationship-focused treatment that is interactive, personal, playful, and fun. The principles are based on attachment theory, and its model is the healthy, attuned relationship between parents and their child. So you're looking at that secure attachment model as your way of working with families. And I also really important to say that we don't want to tell parents that, okay, by the end of this, you're going to have a secure attachment, or say things like, well, because you don't have a secure attachment, this is going to not work. Instead, this is for the clinician to have that model of understanding of what a secure attachment style looks like, meaning that we know when a child has a want or a need, that the caregiver and the parent responds to it, acknowledges it, checks in with it, and then helps the child to respond and heal in a different way, engaged in a more healthier response. And so that cycle is able to happen in maybe not always perfectly, but it's able to move and works differently versus families who are often get stuck in that space of the child as a want or a need. Maybe for the teen is, I want to be able to, don't give me I don't want to have a curfew. This curfew at 10 o'clock doesn't work for me. I want to have a curfew that 2. And the parents get into a power struggle of, instead of, let's figure out how can we find a different way to respond, still having expectations, still having rules, but finding a different way in that doesn't create always for that power struggle that can keep families feeling stuck. So with TheraPlay, which is what is really great for working with families, and this is something you can use with families age 2 all the way up to teens. As teens are getting older, you're going to incorporate more talk therapy. And what I have found to be really helpful is I incorporate theraplay and didactic psychotherapy into when I work with teens, so that we're using, because more verbal, we're still using the interventions and the activities, but we're also being, there's more conversation, more talk that's happening that we want to have happening. So therapy looks at the is multisensory. It focuses, involves touch, movement, rhythm, eye contact, emotional expression. So experiences that regulate the brain for everyone. And the goal is to enhance the attachment, self-esteem, and trust in others. I'm going to take a look and just see where we're at. I see some folks are familiar with it and some are not. So this will be great. Hopefully after this, will give you an opportunity to kind of do some research in. We're going to look at a short video that will show you a little bit about what it looks like. Let me make sure that I have sound. There we go. I love that game.
Play connects kids to their parents. That's really where it all begins. It's very powerful, and it's something that if you've missed it for any reason, it has its consequences.
When a mother and father interact with a baby, that is the food for right brain growth. They sing, they rock, they put him to bed at the right time, they pick him up at the right time, and the baby learns that there's somebody who's uniquely attuned to his needs.
The new brain research suggests that playful interactions between mothers and babies is extremely important in making children feel special and capable and valued. And it's this kind of play that we really picked up as our way of doing theraplay.
Theraplay originated in the 1960s under Chicago's Head Start program.
Come on, jump to me. See, I got you right in the ear.
Play is extremely important. It's what makes it possible for children to really enjoy life, feel competent, and able to take on anything. So we took the model of parent-child interaction, the good parent and their baby, and we figured out how we'd play with 3- and 4-year-olds that would be similar to the play that parents did with their children. And our experience very quickly was that children who had been very withdrawn and not able to relate at all became much more outgoing. Children who were angry and acting out calmed down, they became more cooperative and did very well. So we soon saw that this model of playing the way parents play with their babies is making a huge difference.
Attachment is universal. We all have ways of taking care of our young and helping them prosper and survive and thrive. The form of it, how much eye contact there is, how much touch or whatever, and who does it, even in some societies, might take a somewhat different form. But somebody's got to do it.
Today, theraplay is practiced in over 35 countries.
Theraplay is a very special kind of therapy for children that's based primarily on the pattern of the way parents play and interact with their babies. It includes being able to respond appropriately to the child's needs and to regulate what's happening with the child. What we want to do is go back and build the basic foundation, which is the early building block of self-esteem, self-confidence, and connection that's involved in the formation of attachment. It's eye contact, it's touch, it's rhythm, it's singing, all of that kind of thing. So we're helping parents really attune to the needs of the child.
How did you find that?
Many of these playful activities are so simple and natural, but people forget about them. They get busy, children get busy, and I think just watching someone play with children and understanding that that could be something to try at home is very valuable.
Maggie lies over the ocean. My Maggie lies over the sea.
And they're always surprised at how responsive their children are, way up into the teens.
We have very comfortably used this kind of play in theraplay with kids as they get older. Kids who have not had this kind of experience can be surprisingly accepting of it, even up into the 11, 12, 13. But what we generally do too is we begin to mix it with more talking about what's been happening during the week and how can we help them have an easier time. And then you come back to theraplay for some of the fun stuff.
Champion pillow jumper.
Theraplay sessions are designed by the therapist to address the child's specific needs. Parents are included in the activities, which are based on 4 dimensions of healthy relationships: structure, engagement, nurture, and challenge. The games are fun and interactive, simple, yet powerful in their ability to build deep bonds.
Give her a nice big 1, 2, 3, she can jump off.
1, 2, 3.
We see a lot of different kinds of children who can be helped by theraplay. We've worked with the active, angry, acting out kinds of kids. We've worked with shy, withdrawn children. We've worked with children on the autism spectrum. And the kinds of problems they have, because they're so socially based, can be addressed by this kind of treatment, which really focuses on the social connection.
We want to do activities that will help the child to feel more competent or better and, happy. The nurture piece, which I did for the lotion, is not so much that there's any real healing properties to the lotion per se, but it's more an idea of inside they have a lot of old wounds, and I want them to know that I recognize that they have some things that need taken care of.
There are many reasons why a child might miss out on some of that. We work with high-risk families who perhaps the parents have not been well-parented themselves. There may be substance abuse, there may be domestic violence, there may be poverty. We also work with low-risk families where things have been going along quite nicely, but something has happened that has made this child, made this family a little less secure in their connection. Kids really could benefit from being assured of their parents' presence, times when they really have their parents' undivided attention, and just to feel really connected.
You are good. You're better than good. You're great. Yes, you are.
I think the most beneficial aspect of it for us was it taught us how to enjoy each other again. Because it had been a good long time before there was much enjoyment in each other's company. We'd sort of forgotten how to have a good time. So to come here and just play these goofy little games and really concentrate on each other, that was very beneficial for us.
We have a lot of confidence in the power of this play, just from case study after case study. But we're beginning to get some good scientific evidence. There's an ongoing research project in Finland for children who are in long-term foster care. And the outcome of a really relatively short intervention was that the children appear to be more connected to their foster parents, and behavior problems have reduced, and even 6 months or a year after the treatment ended, those gains have been maintained or increased.
Over time, there have been various people who have done small research studies. Now we're getting into some bigger ones, the kind that you really need to prove that it works, with control groups. And not only a control group that doesn't get any treatment, but even a control group that's getting another kind of treatment. And those things are beginning to be published.
One of them.
So that goes on just a little bit more. What I think is talks about how theraplay SAMHSA has recognized it as an evidence-based practice, and that it's something that can be used in a way of really helping families who maybe have just been doing traditional therapy. The outcomes for treatment are positive change in the child's overall internal working model, increasing their self-esteem, how they feel about themselves, their change in their ability to share things that maybe have been hard for them to talk about because we're using activities, we're using drawing, we're using different ways that don't just require the child to talk. Because oftentimes when we're asking to ask a child what's wrong, or even a teen, tell me what's on your mind, and we get shrugs or I don't know, because verbally there may not be the words for that yet. So being able to show it, being able to feel it, can get a deeper connection, a deeper way of resolving it. And then better self-regulation. As you saw in the video, this is something that I think is really important to know. I think it's important to see that in the video you saw the therapist was right there. At one point helping the mom up, another point helping the child. There was not a therapist sitting just taking notes on the side. But as a therapist, you doing this, using this approach, you are hands in. You're right there in there. And I think that's what families often need when they feel that they're not understood, or they feel that therapy has just not been a place to get to the heart of the issue. When you as a therapist are stepping in and saying, I'm here with you, I'm here in this work with you, I'm going to model, I'm going to show you, I'm going to be there, I'm going to be silly with you, that you're not in this alone, and that I'm here to really not just say I help, but I'm going to show you. And then it helps to decrease behavior problems, and then positive change in parents' inner working model as parents, and helping adoptive and foster parents, caregivers, kinship placements. There's no book out there to be a parent. There's also not it's not a book about how do we have to be the perfect adoptive parent, the perfect foster parent. And oftentimes the powers that be, our child welfare system, our agencies may make that pressure of like, you have to get it right. You have to know what you're doing. You can't get it wrong. Where instead, helping parents in this work of helping parents is to really help parents move away from feeling shame, from feeling guilt, from not getting it right, but helping them to do it better, and helping them to be that good enough parent to a child who has had a various history, and that it's their history and our history together. It's not just separate looking at the child's history and trying to change what's happened, but instead looking at how we as a family, helping families move forward in a future so that families can be healthier, less disruption, less of children being in residential placements, helping families to help connect children to their family of origin and stay connected. So I think there's various ways when we're using this approach that we want to help families to really feel that this is worth it, that this is something that's going to be worth it for their family in the moment and for the future. And so as I kind of come to the end today, I wanted to, as we talk about these attachment approaches for caregivers and for professionals to use, that as clinicians doing this work, we have to use good self-care. Usually in my very first session with parent-only sessions with caregivers and parents, I ask, what do you do for self-care? Or what's the last thing you did for self-care? And I know as clinicians, as a therapist, oftentimes as healers, we are the worst at taking care of ourselves. We put everything on the back burner because we want to help others. But just as with our caregivers, we need to help our caregivers remember, just as the analogy of getting on the plane, you have to get your oxygen first before you can help anyone else. You don't have any oxygen, you will be no good to anyone else. So I really help really look at talking about self-care, having a good a support system that understands you. I know as an adoptive mom, my friends and family often didn't get it. I really had to connect with those who've been in there with me as a foster parent or adoptive parent, who understood what this meant. Instead of, I didn't need to have someone tell me, well, you made this decision, or this is your choice, or all those inappropriate things that friends and family can say and trying to be helpful. It just made things, made me feel worse as a mom. And I love what being there. I love my kids, and they love me, and I wanted us to get it. When things were hard, I wanted help. I wanted to know what could we do, and having the right therapist was critical. And then creating structure and consistency establishing consequences and restitution, and making sure that they're not overly punitive or they're not just one-sided, really having families giving them ways of using redos, other connections, and having parents get into going to support groups, getting into other resources, getting into your own therapy, doing your own work so that you can, as a caregiver and parent, really do what, be at your best, be the best, showing up in your best self that you want to see. And then providing nurture, process feelings, and provide the child with success. So helping families, it's not a cookie cutter approach in doing attachment therapy work. It's really helping families to find a way of being that's going to fit for them as their family. And so you're offering families, again, I don't do, like, for example, I'm not doing a behavior chart. Instead, we do a time in or an emotional safety plan. So other ways that really get from just looking at the surface to really, which I think which goes wonderfully with this, the conference title of really getting beneath the surface, helping families to dig deep. And it requires families to really feel like it's benefiting, that it's something I should spend an hour outside of a busy week to come virtually or in person and do this work. And I will say, as doing the work myself, my family, it's what saved us. It's what made family. It helped us when it was at the time. It was just me before my husband came. I had kids. That was more important than getting married. I wanted to be a mom, and it became critical that we went to therapy every week. We traveled about 2 hours. It was about a 2-hour drive there and back, but it was worth it. It was worth it, and I needed I needed to have the right therapist. And then my last thing I want to say is that some people wonder, will the insurance cover this? Is this something that I could go and find a therapist, and will the insurance cover it? I will say yes. So if you go to the TheraPlay Institute, you'll see there's a directory of therapists. It's national and international that people are trained in this. So I will stop there. I don't know if there's any a brief question or comment before I go and have you enjoy the rest of this amazing conference.
Sabra, I collected some of the questions that were asked throughout.
Great.
I'm just gonna post them in the chat. So these are some of the things that people were asking while you were.
Okay. Let me see. Could you grab one and read it?
Yeah, so the first one was, could TheraPlay be used as a way to strengthen bonds while children are still in foster care to help caregivers be more successful and potentially reduce placement burnout and the added trauma of multiple placements for children?
Yes, I love that question. Yes, that is one I get agencies ask me a lot. They're like, should we wait until they're in, a more permanent placement? I said, no. My experience with a lot of agency foster care placements in my area, I'm in the DC area, is that children get into individual therapy. That's like the first go-to. And I'm like, no, regardless of the family needs to be getting support, and not just the child in individual therapy. I mean, they also individual therapy, but also doing this right away. So definitely.
And then another person asked or said that their big concern is parents and burnout related to that. So she was curious on how to know strategies to keep them motivated to do the work.
Yeah, so I think it's important that you build, and what I found it helpful is with some families, I will start just doing parent-only sessions to really help parents be heard and talk about, helping them get re-energized, talk about getting self-care. If I talk about respite, I talk about their support system. So families who are really in a space of burnout, I find too that they often have felt like they've been doing more traditional therapy, and it's just been sitting on a couch talking for an hour, and it hasn't really gotten to the nonverbal, the more in-depth things that need to be really nurtured and engaged with, and they feel oftentimes that the therapist is just asking them to be the expert in the room, and that can't be the case.
And then there were 2 comments made about a similar thing in regards to theraplay, that they've heard that the therapist just plays and they don't really talk about like stuff and there's not really progress being made. So how to address feeling that way.
So this is someone, 2 comments. I want to make sure I heard correctly. So this is 2 comments from someone who about theraplay.
Yeah, so just
Okay. Mhm.
yeah, and complaining that the counselor just plays and doesn't talk about other like deeper things.
So, and that is where the trust comes in to the work, and having those out also. So doing parent check-ins around that. So again, it may look like it's just playing, but really, if you were in watching that video, if I put mute, should you should see a lot was happening, engagement cut. So it may feel like you're not getting to those deeper issues. Bringing that up, having that discussion, so a therapist can say, well, here's where we're going, here's where we can go. Because sometimes using therapy may be the start, and you may start moving to didactic psychotherapy or another attachment approach that is a little bit more, that's more talk therapy. But and also I would say we use talk as well. So it's not just the play is, we need it. Our well-being, it's critical. Families who are really in a hard place, they need a space to play. It doesn't mean we're not getting to the hard issues. We're still happening. It's just it looks very, very different from traditional therapy. And I think that's what I find too. A lot of families are like, this doesn't look like what we've done before. So it's trusting the process, trusting the therapist, building that relationship with the therapist.
And then someone else asked, are there workbooks that parents can use to practice these techniques? And how could you help parents recognize a therapist that does use those techniques? Like, what questions should they be asking?
Definitely. Great. So definitely so in order to use theraplay, the therapist must be trained in theraplay. And you could ask, could you say, are you trained in theraplay? That's 1. And then 2, doing activities at home. There is a book. If you go on, it's a theraplay for parents. There's a book for parents that talks about theraplay and has activities in the book. I usually don't give families like the one you saw in the video where they stack up pillows. More if we'll do more nurturing activities, something more that is going to be one. I don't want families to get overwhelmed, like going like, and I might say, these are, if you try it once, that's great. If you don't, that's okay. So you want to ask that. The other, so there's a book, there's another book, I Love You book by Becky Bailey. Becky Bailey has an amazing book. That's one I share families who want to do activities outside of sessions, because it's great for transitions, a great for bedtime, and they're just really easy activities that don't require any batteries and bells and whistles, which I think parents need and we all need.
And the last question is, how can foster parents advocate for theraplay services without birth parents or the county feeling the bonding work being done is counterproductive to a goal of reunification?
That's I think you have those meetings, you talk about it, you say, here's something that we would like to do. If we're doing, maybe you're already doing family therapy, we would like to now try therapy to help with the relationship with the child where in here and now. And so it's not where this is going to divide. It's something I think you have that discussion as a team approach.
I think that those are all the questions. I also posted the book that you just suggested in the chat. So I Love You Rituals by Becky Bailey.
Great, thank you.
And then I guess if nobody has any other questions, thank you so much, Sabra, for your presentation. It was really wonderful. I'm also going to post in the chat right now for everyone who attended, if you need training certificates or anything like that, and then also the link to our evaluation form for the presentation. So I'll post that right now.